Welcome to Lead Pods, the official leadership podcast from USMB for pastors and church leaders, where our goal is to increase our impact together.
Hello, friends. Welcome to episode 148 of the USMB Lead Pods. My name is Matt Ersman, and once again, so glad to have you with me for a great conversation today. So, as we are inching closer and closer to the summer and the gathering convention that will be happening in Salt Lake this July, we're continuing this little series where we're getting to know all the people who will be our featured speakers at the convention this summer. And today, I'm excited to be talking with Pastor Aaron Halvorsen. Aaron is the pastor of Community Bible Church in Olathe, Kansas. CBC is getting ready to celebrate their 60th anniversary coming up this summer, which is exciting. And Aaron has been there just a little over 10 years now. Aaron is a very gifted speaker, and he's got really great ministry experience, not only at CBC, but also with his upbringing and seminary and ministry experience up in the Pacific Northwest around Washington area. And Aaron and I cover a lot of ground today. So the theme of convention this year is cultivate. And Aaron and I spend quite a bit of time talking about, quote unquote, watering, the day-to-day, maybe not so glamorous elements of being a pastor, being faithful where you're planted for an extended season of time. And Aaron is certainly a good example of that. We'll dive into the value of denominations and how excited we both are about the gathering coming up this summer. We cover a lot of ground, but Aaron is just a very genuine, very fun guy. So I think if you don't know Aaron, I think you'll enjoy getting to know him on today's episode. So let's take a quick break to hear from this week's sponsor, and then we'll get right to my conversation with Pastor Aaron Halvorsen.
Great news for the Central Valley and beyond. Fresno Pacific University has received a transformational $10 million Lilly Endowment Grant to equip and support today's church leaders, especially co-vocational pastors serving our communities. This investment expands seminary training, launches new programs, and provides vital scholarships for ministry students. And when you give toward the Lilly Matching Grant, your gift is matched, doubling your impact. Join us in strengthening the future of the church. Give today at fpu.edu/seminary.
All right, friends. Well, today I'm excited to be chatting with the one and only Pastor Aaron Halvorsen. Aaron is the lead pastor of CBC Community Bible Church in Olathe. He's been there since 2015, I think. Is that right, Aaron?
That is correct. Yep, 2015.
Yeah. So, and Aaron will be one of the speakers at convention coming up this summer. And so today we're just going to kind of hang out with Aaron, get to know him a little bit, maybe preview his talk just a little bit, but mostly just get to know him and hang out. So, Aaron, thanks for being here, man. Great to have you with us.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I'm a little worried about the podcast itself. Maybe if you're scraping the bottom of the barrel here, you must be running out of gas. So, but happy to be here.
Not at all, man. You are going to be, one of the featured speakers at conventions. So this is nothing compared to the convention. So, well, a little peek behind the curtain. So, Aaron, I don't really know you super well, Aaron, but I'm in the Tabor GSM program. We just wrapped up a class. I guess, should I call you Professor Halvorsen? I don't know what I should call you.
No, not at all. My mom called me Reverend, and all of the mail she sends me, but no special titles beyond that. I don't have a terminal degree, so I don't think I've earned the professor title yet. So just a friend and adjunct, that'll work.
Nice. Well, yeah. So you were one of the leaders for the class we just took up. You did a great job leading that, and I've got to know you a little bit through that class. So now the class is over, so I don't feel like I have to suck up to you. Like the grades are in. So
yeah, that's right. Yeah. I had very little hand in grading, so you can blame Wendell for all of that, whatever score you received. But it was a blast. I had a lot of fun with you and the others. I really enjoyed, quick plug for that Tabor initiative program. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed being in that and with the students. It was a good time.
Yeah, it was fun. You did a great job facilitating a lot of our conversation. So, okay. Well, Aaron, so again, if people don't know you, CBC, you've been there, a little over 10 years. Is that right? So tell us more about you. If people listening don't know you very well, tell us more about you, your family, CBC, whatever you want to kind of fill us in on.
Sure, yeah. I grew up in the Pacific Northwest, mostly in Spokane, Washington, seminary in Portland, Oregon. And about, 11 years ago now, it was the day after the Seahawks lost the Super Bowl that I moved down to Kansas City. So it was really
Marshawn Lynch, man. Marshawn Lynch.
Yeah. I just remember that distinctly. The day after that, I moved down here to Olathe, Kansas, which I had never heard of before moving down here. But it was easy to adopt a new team, and have been enjoying that ever since, except for maybe this year. But yeah, I lived here 11 years, been just a wonderful church to be a part of, really happy here. When I left Portland, I was married to my wife, Maggie. for a few years. And we had one daughter, Nora, and now we have 5 kids, Nora, Diana, Simon, Audrey, and Leo. And just been enjoying life here in Olathe, Kansas, pastoring and ministering in this wonderful church.
Very cool. So recently it's kind of funny, we've had a few guests from the Oregon, Washington, Portland areas. And so again, whenever in Christian circles, whenever we talk about that area, a lot of us just kind of jump to, it's such an interesting part of the country where it's largely secular, largely unchurched, or at least that's the perception that those of us in the Midwest have. Was that true of your upbringing?
Well, so I grew up in Spokane, Washington, which in some ways feels culturally similar to Olathe in Kansas, suburban, at least where I was in Spokane. And it's more of what you might call a red part of Washington state. But I did live in Seattle for a year. I've lived in Tacoma, lived in Portland for a few years. So I've got to experience that part of the Pacific Northwest as well. So one of the things I did notice when Maggie and I came down to Olathe and visited for the first time as we drive around, and it did strike us, the frequency and size of churches was far different than what we were accustomed to in Portland, Oregon, that's for sure. So, on kind of the outskirts of the Bible Belt here in Kansas is definitely different culturally. And there are things to appreciate about both areas and both regions of the country as far as it comes to even just church, Christianity, your interaction with the culture. There are just different dynamics. And I don't think I have a preference these days for one over the other. It's just different.
And have you been MB for a while now? I know you were part of some kind of MB study or something in that part of the country, right? Remind us some of the background of how big your MB roots are here.
Yeah, they're not deep in that I did not grow up Mennonite Brethren. So I grew up, my parents went to a Presbyterian church when I was younger, and then a Foursquare church, and then a Baptist church, and then in college went to an open Bible church, experienced the Sovereign Grace church. So I jumped around denominationally quite a bit.
Yeah, you got all the bases covered.
That's right. Yeah, trying to swing from one end to the other, charismatic, non-charismatic. Probably the trend of the churches that I went to growing up to is they were probably all in the mold of the seeker-sensitive movement in larger churches. So that's kind of what I was raised in. Then when it was time to think about going to seminary, I talked to one of my pastor buddies who said, he gave me some list of seminaries to think through. And he said, if you want to stay in the Pacific Northwest, you ought to consider Western seminary. So that's where I went to seminary. And at Western, about 6 months into my time there, my advisor and he was the pastoral ministry and preaching professor at Western Seminary, and his friend, who was the counseling professor, wanted to plant a church on the seminary campus. Western is formerly a Baptist denominational school, but it's dropped the formal affiliation a while ago. So it's essentially a non-denominational school, but it's a Baptist school. And I had a great time, a great experience. But because they were a non-denominational school, they could plant any kind of church they wanted on the seminary campus. And that counseling professor's name was Norm Thiessen. So some might know Norm Thiessen. And you can guess by the last name what his affiliation was. And so they planted a Mennonite Brethren church on the campus of Western Seminary. And I got involved with that in that church plant as an intern about 6 months after I started my seminary time there. And that was just an awesome experience for me, being able to plant or be part of a plant with several other interns, people who are going to seminary, attending school, learning life and ministry together. Just a kind of a greenhouse for myself and others at that time. So thankful for that experience. That was my introduction to the Mennonite Brethren world. And even then, for those few years at that church, I wasn't steeped in the Mennonite Brethren world at all. But when I went to look for a vocational full-time ministry, the Mennonite Brethren, one of the denominations I was looking at and kind of examined, the real draw was we were a church plant, and then we planted out of that church, Christ Church in Selden, where Jared Pulliam is currently the pastor. So I was with Jared Pulliam there, good friend of mine from the beginning. But in that church plant of Christ Church, got to know Don Morris and at the time Gary Wall, who's the district minister. But seeing their heart for planting churches was a real big draw, and that connection, I was just really enthused about that. So that was my first introduction to Mennonite Brethren world, through church planting, actually. And thankful for that connection. And ever since coming down here, gotten to know, the broader MB family and appreciate it more and more.
Yeah, very cool. Well, for people who aren't familiar, can you tell us a little bit more about CBC? Tell us about Community Bible, and maybe even tell us like Olathe. What's the kind of culture in your city, and what is it like to be there? And maybe have you seen what's changed over the 11 years you've been there? Just help us kind of know your context a little bit more.
So I've been here 11 years, and it's been just a really faithful church. One of the things that excited me about it from the beginning is it was a church that had been around a long time, and we'll celebrate our 60th anniversary this summer.
Oh, wow.
Soon after I got there, we celebrated our 50th, which is a really cool thing to be a part of, to celebrate 50 years of, God's faithfulness in one area, and to meet, previous pastors and people who had been in the church. So it's kind of a long established, not the oldest, but it is an established church in kind of suburban Olathe, which, how to describe the culture here. It's largely, I think what I would describe Olathe, and I hope this is accurate, is people who are blue collar mentality with white collar jobs. So hardworking, sons and daughters of farmers who are living in or doing tech and medical and those kinds of jobs. So really hardworking, faithful people, and CBC in particular, and every pastor in every church loves to say this, but I think this is genuinely true about our church, is a really loving, welcoming church. And I've heard that from a number of people who've come and stuck as members, that one of the things they're initially attracted to is the friendliness and the warmth and the love of the people. Again, everybody wants to say that, but I do think it's distinctly true about our church. And in some cases, I've said that there are people who I see visit who I can tell they want to be anonymous at a church, and they're one and done. Like that's enough, because it's hard to get out of a church service without somebody introducing themselves, talking to you, that kind of thing. So I really appreciate and love that about our particular community. We have kind of all age ranges from young to old. So that's a lot of fun. Young marrieds and kids, seniors, and everything in between. And it's just been a good, faithful people to be a part of.
Very cool. We kind of we talked a little bit about how you were involved in the Tabor program. The class that you taught was about preaching. And again, I don't know you super well, Aaron, but I know preaching is really important to you. You're a gifted speaker. I know you take your study of scripture very seriously. You do a lot of research for your messages, and a lot of prep goes into your sermons. Would you say, is preaching kind of one of your favorite things about being a pastor? Or is that kind of one of your key things that you enjoy and focus on the most, would you say?
Certainly one of, and I would say maybe one of the reasons I am a pastor is because preaching and sermons are what have impacted me maybe some of the most in my own. I mean, there's a lot that goes into shaping a person, obviously, but in my own spiritual life, I've just been impacted by a lot of faithful teaching and sermons. So I was drawn to that. When I was in college, I had a pastor friend, or he was kind of discipling a group of us who were involved with Campus Crusade for Christ up at Eastern Washington University. So I had a pastor friend, and he invited us to a preaching workshop, which is really what it was a kind of a hermeneutics and outlining workshop, at that time called Proclamation Trust, since has been renamed Simeon Trust, and they do workshops all across the world. But I went to that workshop, and they took us through kind of, here's how you outline, here how to interpret. They critiqued your outlines, but also as part of that, they gave model sermons. And one of the two men who were leading it, one was Kent Hughes, who pastored outside of Chicago, a college church, for many, many years. Then a guy by the name of William Taylor, who's over in St. Helens in England. But I remember Kent Hughes preaching in that workshop a model sermon from Philippians. And my friend and I, who were there, looked at each other and said, where has this been all of our lives? It was we may have heard, and I'm sure I did hear, kind of expository preaching before, but for some reason it hit me at that moment as this is incredible. He opened up Philippians and taught Philippians, and I understood what it was saying. It brought it home. He analyzed it, expounded it, applied it, and it was almost a second conversion moment for me in that time. Though, this is what preaching can be. And if you know Kent Hughes, he's not a terribly and I say this in maybe the most complimentary way possible, not a terribly dynamic personality or speaker. It was just the faithful bringing out of the text that impacted me. So I think probably from that moment in college, I may have developed an interest in preaching and what good, faithful exposition can do.
Yeah, very cool. So again, a lot of people, if they haven't heard you before, will get to hear you at convention. I'm looking forward to hearing from you there. It's going to be great to have you. So tell us about that. So I guess, I don't even know the process. Did Aaron kind of invite you, Aaron Box, and were you excited about that? And maybe to give us a sneak preview, what are you hoping to talk about?
Yeah, well, I'm sure there's some secret council where they come up with these things and the plan for and Aaron and asked me if I'd be willing to do it. And my general disposition denominationally, and in some ways in life as well, is if somebody asks you to do something, you just say yes. Now, that doesn't always work. Obviously, as a pastor in a family, I think to put up some boundaries. But denominationally, and this would maybe also be my pitch for everybody coming and getting involved in the conventions, that if you're going to be part of a group, then invest in it. And so Aaron asked, of course, I'm going to say yes, and I'm excited to be a part of it. And I know the theme verse is that 1 Corinthians 3:6 of I planted, Apollos watered, God gave the increase. And I think my section of that is the Apollos watered part, which I'm really excited about.
Okay. So
just trying to think through, all right, how did Apollos water? How did God water through Apollos? And, from Acts 18, we know he was a gifted speaker, an eloquent speaker, but I don't think it was his eloquence that made him effective. What Acts 18 then goes on to focus on even more is his faithfulness and his accuracy with scriptures. And it was the word that did the work through that. So I'm really excited to think through and examine or explore that idea of how does God water his church? How does God water pastors? I'm speaking of the pastors part of this. So how are we grown? What does God do, and how does God do that work of growing and cultivating us as people? And that question that Paul asked in the beginning of 1 Corinthians 3:5, what then is Apollos? What then is Paul? Who are we? Kind of exploring a ministerial identity a little bit. Who are we? Well, we're nothing relative to who God is and what he's doing. So exploring that a little bit, I'm excited for.
That's awesome. Well, I love that passage, and I don't want to steal your thunder or take away from your points, but can we
I'll steal from you? Yeah.
No. Well, if you're okay with it, let's dive into that just a little bit, because I think it's just a really interesting topic. And I think we always talk about the harvest is plentiful, the workers are few. Everybody wants to harvest, right? That's the exciting thing, is to see the fruit of your labor. And but that verse, and specifically that part of it, mentions that the watering is really important, and that's maybe not the glorious part, or the part that we, it's not the end goal to just water. We want to also harvest, but I think we miss out on the importance of sometimes pastors and church leaders, we're called to just do the long, kind of boring work of watering, right? Can you talk about that a little bit? And maybe just I think we just forget the importance of that. Can you just talk about that a little bit?
One of the things I said to my church when I got here, and I mean this, and I still mean this, is, if the Lord wills, Lord tarries, I'd love to be here many, many years and decades, because, and again, God can do whatever he wants, but my plan is to be here and, preach and minister until I die, then roll me away. But the reason for a long-term ministry is you get to see that growth over the long. Yeah. And a lot of that is imperceptible. It is. In the day-to-day, it's easy to be discouraged by it. It doesn't seem like a whole lot is happening. But if you have that long-term perspective of how God waters and grows over long periods of time, you can see a lot of really cool stuff happen. And I've been here now, again, 11 years. So I'm starting to see some of that. Some of our younger kids who are being discipled at a young age, starting to mature and minister, and people grow over time. So there's a really exciting aspect of that, but it is often imperceptible. I think of going back to Kent Hughes, actually, he wrote a really impactful book for me, Liberating Ministry from the Success Syndrome. And he talks in that book about just be careful about not evaluating fruit until the end, kind of to borrow a line from C.S. Lewis, in the end, there will be surprises in heaven. Things that you didn't anticipate one way or another. And I think there will be, for all of us who are faithfully, by God's grace, walking after him, I think in the end, we will see all sorts of things that God did that we had no idea was happening or going on. And that's the work that he does through the word that we often don't notice. And I think every preacher has had this experience of you preach a sermon, you get down, you think, oh, I really blew that one or didn't come out the way. And then a couple days later, somebody says, I was really impacted by that. And usually by that time, I can't even remember what I said or if I said what they claimed I said and stuff. But God does all sorts of stuff through things you just don't anticipate. So.
Well, another thing I appreciate about the farming analogies that are all over Scripture in the New Testament is like there are seasons, right? And so sometimes a season is literally a couple months, but sometimes seasons are years or longer, right? So I think sometimes we're just in seasons where the culture around us needs a ton of watering, and I don't think we need to feel bad about that. Like if sometimes that's just what's required in order for things to grow, right?
Oh yeah, and I might get some of the details wrong in this, but D.A. Carson wrote a book about his dad's ministry in French Canada in Quebec called Memoirs of an Ordinary Pastor. Another, along with Liberating Ministry from the Success Syndrome, another one that every pastor ought to read. But Memoirs of an Ordinary Pastor, his dad, I think, faithfully preached in French Canada for decades. And then near the end of his life, there was a revival all around him. But he never really got to see a lot of the fruit of that. But he was just long-term faithful, week in, week out, serving the church, serving his family. And then, of course, underneath him watered a son who would be hugely influential, D.A. Carson, across the world. So there's just, you never know, the church that Spurgeon wandered into once and was converted, that kind of, you hear those stories all the time of the anonymous pastor or the anonymous minister or evangelist who nobody heard of, but they were faithful in their craft or faithful in their service and their ministry. And then somebody else heard it and somebody else had a hugely influential ministry. And that's all the stuff that God uses. So I've always wanted to be really, really careful about kind of the pragmatic inclination to judge the value of my work based on apparent numbers, results, success, those kinds of things. Not that we are against invisible, tangible growth, but if we're going to base our identity or the value of our ministry on those things, I think we set ourselves up for disappointment. We just never know what it is that God has planned and what he is doing in his timing and his seasons. Go back to John 3, the Spirit blows where it wills.
Well, to go a little bit further on that, just a couple minutes ago, you kind of hinted that, like, as pastors and church leaders, a lot of times we're the ones doing the watering, doing the harvesting, whatever, but we have to water ourselves, right? You just mentioned that pastors need this themselves too, right? Are you going to touch on that, or maybe can you expand on how do we actually make sure that we're taking care of ourselves as leaders? Yeah.
Well, I think I probably should. And you asked, are you going to, and this is still 6 months away. I'm still working on what I'm going to say Sunday. So I'm really sure.
You got plenty of time.
Preacher. Yeah. So I reserve the right to let the word and the Lord lead me. But I do think this is an important thing. And I'm feeling this now after a little over 10 years. There's the real temptation or danger of stagnation in ministry, as there is in life, just for any normal person who's been walking with the Lord for a long time. There are seasons where you either are or feel stagnated. So that's a danger that I think we as pastors, we're well aware of, and anybody who's been walking with the Lord is well aware of. So that's something I want to think about and be alert to. Or how am I watered? What is it that feeds my own soul? Because it is hard to minister out of an empty and dry place.
Yes. And part of what's so hard about that is, especially if we've been serving in churches for a long time, like we know the answers, right? Like there's nothing new. We know, right? We know what the answers are, but just actually having the discipline of doing the disciplines and sticking with them in the long term, that is hard. Like that's just a very hard part of being human, right? There's no secrets. You just got to do the hard work.
Yeah. And I was speaking with a couple men who I meet with regularly yesterday about there are times where I'm not often or naturally very self-reflective or self-analytical. It's not necessarily my nature. So it's actually pretty easy for me to not know what's going on with myself emotionally for a while. And then, a few months later go, I think I've been feeling this way.
And
it has occurred to me that it's not terribly difficult to not be joyful in what I'm doing. Even if I'm just kind of going along, I'm not necessarily miserable or not upset, but am I actually joyful and really thanking the Lord for the opportunities he's given, for the fact that I get to, sit down and have a conversation with you, that I get to help teach Awana lessons tonight. You get to go to a prison tomorrow and help teach a class there and get to preach. I mean, these are incredible things I get to do just in week in, week out ministry. And it's very easy to just kind of go through the motions of that without taking stock of how faithful the Lord is in some of these things.
Man, well, if you get that figured out, you need to write a book or something, because you're right. It's so all of us, there's so many great things that we get to do. I mean, I guess I don't want to speak for everyone, but I think just the busyness of life, it's hard to maintain joy when we have a long to-do list. I think that's just, again, that's an unfortunate reality.
Talk to anybody, everybody says this, but I think our peers, my age group and younger, we feel busyness quite a bit. And there's a whole other conversation to get into there of whether or not we're actually more busy or whether it's the perception of busyness, just the cluttered, noisy world we live in and devices attached to us. So that busyness and feeling I've got a long to-do list can really ruin gratitude and appreciation and taking stock of that. So my wife and I've talked a bit about gratitude, and that's something we want to restore a little bit, and probably something I need to work on personally.
Yeah. Well, you're not alone. I feel like we're all in a similar boat. Let me go back to convention a little bit. There's kind of, two groups of people. There's people who love conferences and conventions and hearing guest speakers and hanging out for a few days in a hotel, and then people who that's just not their jam. So where do you land on that spectrum, and what's your feeling on conventions and conferences in general?
I'm one of those people who loves them. And for different reasons in different seasons of my life. When I was younger, going to some of the bigger conferences and bigger speakers, I really, really enjoyed it. And just because it was all brand new, it was all fresh. And there's still some of those that I really enjoy for different reasons. But now I'd much rather be at like a USMB convention than any other conference or convention, because it's more about the relationships now than it was. I still remember, I think the first convention I went to may have been a Southern District gathering, I think in Edmond, the first year or so I was here. And of course, I remember that kind of the new kid in class, the kind of first day of high school type thing. I don't know anybody here, so I'm still trying to learn. It's a little bit awkward, and but I did have the foresight at the time to know, just stick with it. Year after year, you'll get to know more people, make connections. And now, after being here for a while, I love these kinds of gatherings because it's like meeting up with friends and family again and getting to see other friends and pastors from across the USMB spectrum that I don't get to see on a day-to-day basis. So for me, going to these things now is all the content, the workshops, those things are beneficial and absolutely can take something out of them, and I don't discount that at all. But what I really love about these, why I'm excited to be there in Salt Lake City, is the opportunity to reconnect with friends and get a check on how are their churches doing, what are they going through, how can we partner together. I've had really good ministry partnerships that have come out of conventions. We send people over to Lakeview Church in Salt Lake City. We have a number of times they've come over and visited us, have developed better partnerships with a couple of pastors down in Hillsboro, and getting to know you all over there at Ridge Point and the connection that we have now. So those kind of partnerships and relationships not only help me personally, but I think they help my church. I think they're a benefit for CBC, just the fact that I get to be connected with people across our family. So I am really just enthused and genuinely excited to be there. So I would encourage others to go. And maybe if I can throw in a quick plug, if there are any people who are listening who are, not on staff and not pastors, but they're part of their church leadership. One of the things my church does is afford me the opportunity to go and help, cover travel. It gives me the time to do so. And they've seen that as a value from the beginning. And I would hope that's universal, but I know it's probably not. So if there are churches out there, leadership boards, I would just encourage them to encourage your own pastors and leaders to attend, because I think there's a great value in if you're going to be part of the denomination and working together.
Yeah, well, that's great. It's kind of funny. I think you and I might be on a similar path, because when I first was starting at Ridge Point, I went to Catalyst a few years and some of those kind of bigger, flashy ones. And yeah, there's the big name speakers, there's the big name worship bands, and those are awesome. Like I would still enjoy doing something like that. I think I think you're right. Maybe I don't know if this is personal preference or personality or whatever, but the longer you're in the same groove for a while, I think you kind of hear kind of similar messages from the kind of the big dog speakers who are speaking everywhere. And there's kind of this something special about, oh yeah, hey Aaron, I know you, and hey, oh there's the other Aaron I know from who, something.
The other Aaron.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I don't know if that's an age thing, if that's a culture thing, or if that's the longer you're in the same role thing. But I agree that there's something special about USMB gatherings where we're big enough where there's a lot of people you don't get to see on a regular basis, but we're not so big that you're gonna if you've been around for a while, you're gonna recognize a ton of people there. So I don't know. Do you think that's just a weird quirk that you and I have, or is that something with longevity, or how does that work, Aaron?
I'd hope that it would be just a standard if you've been around a while. Have to ask some of those who have been around even longer. Ask Brent whether he still enjoys going to gatherings. I know he'll tell you honestly. It's the
You're right.
So maybe I'm in the sweet spot. They're not totally played out for me, but I definitely enjoy it.
Would you say that is kind of one of the, again, there's pros and cons to big churches, big denominations, small. But I think that's one of the really awesome things about USMB. I think our size is kind of unique. We are a smaller conference of churches, but we're big enough that there's really a lot that we can learn from each other. Honestly, we have big churches in California and Utah, and we have small churches in Oklahoma and Kansas and everywhere in between, right? So I guess, has that been kind of your experience as we gather? There really is a pretty wide range of experiences out there, but it's small enough that we still have a lot in common. Has that been your experience?
I think so, and I really appreciate that. I meet monthly with a pastor friend of mine, kind of a mentor who's a pastor of a Southern Baptist church. And there are a lot of Southern Baptist churches here in the Kansas City area, with Midwestern being kind of a hub. And he's a really good guy, really great and faithful pastor. But I've talked to him a little bit about, the SBC gatherings that's a different thing. They're national conventions. That's a different feel than what we have, which is a far more familial feel. Mm-hmm. I've appreciated about the Mennonite Brethren. You're going to find different kinds of churches. There is a variety and different styles. You're going to find, larger churches. You're going to find smaller rural churches. And I appreciate that kind of diversity and that breadth, and the fact that you can access each other and get to know people from a wide variety of contexts. So I'm not just pigeonholed to talking to pastors of churches my size and my context. I appreciate that quite a bit.
And you mentioned you've worked with, other MB churches. You've sent people back and forth, and there's kind of this living conversation. I think there's some in USMB, but it's probably in every denomination about like how valuable is a denomination? Do we really need that kind of structure? Do we really need to have that level of accountability? If we're big enough that we can be self-sustaining, is that okay? Or do we really need this? Well, if you've heard that conversation or been a part of it, what would you chime in on that?
Yeah. My quick take is I really think it's important for a few reasons. I can find in churches very close to me, and I do have pastors' friends who I connect with regularly, and those churches I can pick and choose are probably maybe more like-minded with me and maybe even my own church than a lot of the number of churches across USMB. Yeah, you can just kind of do that picking and choosing. Yeah, and that's good. And I appreciate that connection. But it is helpful, I think, to know that you're part of a broader network, that it's not just, we kind of have some loose affiliation, but it actually means something to be connected together. Mm-hmm. And because of that, you actually have to learn how to work together. It's kind of like having, multiple siblings. You're gonna have some different personalities, and it'll sharpen you and sanctify you to learn how to work together like that. Mm-hmm. There's real benefit in that, and there's benefit for your church in knowing that your church is not the kingdom of God, that there are other churches that you are associated with that you're going to serve, they're going to serve you, that to kind of force you to look outside of your own context. Again, it's one of the reasons I like gatherings. So as a pastor, you get it's very easy to just look at my own church, my own context, week in, week out, and it's where my attention should be. But then to lift my eyes and to see what's going on over in California or over in Washington or Oregon or Utah or Oklahoma, anywhere else.
Yeah.
Say, what's going on in your neck of the woods, and to encourage one another, to build up one another. And again, sometimes, all right, we see things differently. How do we resolve this together? I think that's a really sharpening, necessary, humbling, encouraging, all those things. Mm-hmm. So I place a high value on, denominations, or if not denominations, some type of intentional structured association for churches. I don't think independence is always a good thing for us.
Yeah, I agree. Totally agree. So we've hinted on this a little bit, but the overall theme this year is cultivate, and there's kind of this idea of living on mission with Jesus. And living on mission, I feel like that's one of those kind of Christian buzzwords that I kind of roll my eyes a little bit. Like, it's just this coolness. Everybody's saying it all of a sudden. It's just kind of in the culture, in the zeitgeist a little bit. So I don't know if living on mission is exactly going to be part of your talk or not, but what exactly, what does that mean to you, and what do you hope that we kind of collectively discern at the gathering?
Yeah. Well, I resonate with kind of the living on mission thing. It's a good phrase, but especially following off the missional movement, there's kind of, how do you define mission? What is mission? It's definitely a question for maybe another time. And obviously, mission is really, really important to all of us, and to me. It's part of why I'm serving on the Multiply board right now for time being, is because we have a heart for mission, and how do we do this together is an important question. My talk will probably more focus on that cultivate part, the growth aspect of it, just for what I'm doing. So I'm going to leave it to others to tackle the missional component, who can do that better than I can by God's grace. But for the cultivate growth part, I think that's what we'll probably lean into more and excited about. Yeah, so that's kind of where I'm going to camp out.
Yeah,
hoping that we're encouraged, and through whatever I have to say, through what others have to say, I want to be encouraged to grow as we gather together, not just to be told, here are more things you can do and should do. It's one of the challenges sometimes of conferences. You come away with a giant list of, here's all the things I should be doing that I'm not doing as a pastor. Now I feel like a failure. That can be not helpful. What I'm hoping and what I'm looking forward to and praying for is that my affections and inclinations will be stirred, and I'll be grown in that way with a greater desire, a bigger view of Christ, so that we can take mission and following him and chasing after him more seriously. So I'm really hoping that again, and looking forward to affection and inclination being stirred for growth and mission.
Yeah, that's a great point. I just had a meeting yesterday. So I've got a guy that he's a friend, but he's also kind of like a consultant type guy who looks at some stuff that I'm working on and gives some feedback. And it's so helpful. And it's also kind of deflating, because what you just said, every meeting I come away with, here's 10 things I quote unquote should be doing that I feel like I don't have time for, but it'd be great if we could pull this off. But I don't know if we can. Right. And so I totally resonate with that. So
I feel it all the time. I mean, if you kind of got off of social media, one of the reasons was, if you follow Christian social media, I mean, every day there's a new thing telling pastors, here's what you have to do better. And that is a great recipe for discouragement and depression, because all of us are limited in our own capacity naturally. And we are all, none of us are perfect, and none of us have all the gifts. It's by God's design. So, but when you read about all the things, or think about all the things you should be doing or could be doing, boy, that can be discouraging really quickly. So it's not an excuse for laziness to say, all right, I can't do that, but it can be hard to be confronted with that constantly.
Yes. So you've already kind of hinted on this, so it's okay if you kind of repeat yourself. But if that's not what you want pastors to feel, what do you hope pastors feel coming away from convention, but maybe your message specifically? Like, what do you want them to take away from your talk? And again, with the caveat that it's 6 months away and you haven't written it yet.
Yeah. So I can give you, I was thinking about this question actually a little bit, and what do I want people to come away from every sermon with? And so there's a little bit of a generic answer, but I was reflecting on one of the things that was impacting me. I did a class on Karl Barth in seminary, and I appreciate a lot of things. We can quibble with a lot of things about Karl Barth and his theology and even his home life. There's some things to be critical of, but one of the things I do really appreciate is his focus on Christ-centeredness. And he's not the only one who has brought that out. I've gotten that elsewhere. But in his office, he had a painting, I think by Matthias Grunewald, if I'm saying that correctly, but it was painting of the crucifixion. It's a painting of the crucifixion, and on the side is John the Baptist. And John the Baptist. And a lot of paintings you'll see of John the Baptist feature him pointing to Jesus. And in this crucifixion painting, John the Baptist is there, his fingers pointing at Jesus. And apparently the story goes that Carl, Bart would tell people, I want to be that finger pointing to Christ on the cross. And I think that's what, if anything, that's what I want to come away with from our time together is let's point our hearts and our minds and our souls to Christ crucified and resurrected and ascended, and who will return. And if I can point to Christ and point to the Word and the work that He does through His Word and by His Spirit, and encourage us, you want to talk about Christian growth, here's where Christian growth happens, is by kind of taking our eyes off of ourselves and looking at the one who does the word. And that'll be the goal, I think. Now, however that shakes out in the process.
Nice. That's great, man. That's a great goal. This is an aside, but maybe just because I've heard you teach a few times now, you have a good mind. You can pull out quotes and names and painters' names and all off the top of your head. I'm impressed. For what it's worth, I'm not very good at that. And I feel like you can pull out left and right. So good job.
Well, if you spend time with me, you'll figure out that it's all the same 5 or 6 things. It's like talking to your grandfather who says the same stories 4 or 5 times. If you spend enough time with me, that's all there. He just picks the 5 things he repeats all over the place. Yeah.
Nice.
So well, my church knows all my illustrations by now.
Okay. Well, I'm new enough that I'm still in thing. Hang on to it while you can.
And I'll dazzle you with the novelty of it.
There you go. I love it. All right, man. Well, I think we can maybe kind of start to wrap up here. Any kind of any other thoughts that you just kind of whatever pastoral things you want to share, or kind of a last encouragement to sign up to come to convention, or what else can we wrap up with as we start to grow here?
I'm just looking forward to it. I'm really, I think, increasingly encouraged and curious at the same time to see the direction of our family, our USMB together. And so that's one of the reasons why I'm looking forward to gathering, is just getting a better sense of where are we headed and what are we doing together. And that excites me. And as a local church pastor, I'm curious, okay, how's our association doing we're a part of? But I do find, coming in when I was newer, I had a lot of questions, and you still have a lot of questions, but I had a lot of questions. All right, well, who are we? Where are we going? But the longer I've been around, the more encouraged, because I think I know the heart of the people. I know the work of the Lord through others in our group. And so I'm more enthused now than I was 10, 11 years ago. So I'm excited to gather again and say, all right, where's the Lord leading us now?
Mm-hmm. Good. That's great, man. I'm with you. I think it's an exciting time. I saw randomly just a picture of the even just the USMB staff from like 3 years ago, and it's almost completely turned over and not very much time. And we're kind of in an interesting season where both at USMB level, but also just on the lead pastor level, there's kind of a lot of change happening around that time. And again,
certainly on the multiply level,
definitely
that's a big part of that. So that's exciting. And what's the Lord going to do there? That's obviously something I'm thinking and praying about and invested in.
Yeah. So there's obviously a little bit of nerve that might come with that much change, but also a lot of opportunity and a lot of things to be excited about as we look ahead. So, yeah.
I found I'm a person who really likes change, so I'm excited by that. So if if new things are happening, then that excites me quite a bit.
Yes. Very cool. Well, Aaron, thanks for your time today. I'm looking forward to hearing you speak at convention, and hopefully we can just personally catch up a little bit when we're there too. I'd enjoy that, but thanks for being on the podcast today, Aaron. It's been great getting to know you a little bit better.
Thank you. You do great work, so keep it up. Appreciate your gifts.
Thanks, man. Thanks for your time.
All right, thank you.
Planning your trip to USMB Gathering 2026? We've got great travel tips to make your journey easier. When you fly into Salt Lake City International Airport, you can save with special flight discounts from United and Delta using event-specific codes. Once you're here, skip the stress and take the Trax Light rail system from the airport to downtown, just a short walk from the Hilton Salt Lake City Center. The Hilton offers special rates for gathering guests and free parking. We want your trip to be smooth so you can focus on connecting, worshiping, and being refreshed. Visit usmb.org/travel2026 for tips and discounts.
Well, one more time, many thanks to Aaron for that great conversation today. And I just so appreciate his heart for ministry, for staying steady over the long haul, to teaching and preaching the truth in his context there in Olathe. Lots of great stuff today, and I'm looking forward to hearing him at the gathering this summer as well. So we keep plugging it. If you haven't yet, I do encourage you to head over to usmb.org. Check out all the details about the gathering convention in July. Registration's open now, so book your spot. As you probably know, you can attend either just the Pastors Conference or just the convention or both. I highly, highly encourage you to make sure that you're there. It's going to be a great week together, and I would love to see you there. So sign up now. USMB.org. You can check out the list of speakers and some other important updates about the event. So check it out. We hope to see you there. All right. And as always, I really am so grateful for all of you who tune in on a regular basis. So thank you so much for listening today, wherever you are. Hope you have a great rest of your week, and I'll look forward to seeing you next time here on Lead Pods.
Thanks for listening to Lead Pods. Make sure you don't miss an episode by subscribing to our show wherever you're listening today. Learn more by visiting usmb.org, and be sure to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. We'll see you next time as we learn more practical tools to increase our impact together.